It's Lucy Litch, and this is Tiny House Conversations. It's the Australian-based podcast where I interview experienced tiny houses, tiny builders, and adventurers in the tiny world so you can discover how to create, build, and transition into tiny life. Before we get into the show, I want to know something. Are you a tiny houser, and would you like to share your tiny house story and experiences on the podcast? Or are you a business that has a product or service that aligns with the tiny house movement and would be beneficial for the tiny house community that you'd also like to share on the podcast? If so, I'd love to hear from you, and you can head over to tinyhouseconversations.com, and on there you'll see a section that says share your story. If you fill out your details there, I'll get back to you very soon. Now, here's the intro. Hey, it's Lucy here, bringing you another episode of Tiny House Conversations. Today I'm speaking with Anthony and Kira, who are experienced tiny houses living in the Northern Rivers of New South Wales. Kira is a silversmith and Anthony is an environmental educator, and they've been living in their off-grid tiny home for over 3 years. And in this conversation, we talk about natural building materials, including natural paint, unexpected discoveries, challenges, and lessons learned from tiny house living, including when in a relationship or living with others in a small space. Lots of laughs around that one. We also talked about regenerative agriculture and syntropic food forests and how this way of farming can feed entire communities and then some. And having a deeper connection with nature, the weather, the seasons, and everyday life through tiny house living, and conscious lifestyle choices and ways to reduce single-use plastics, and lots more. So, on to the show with Anthony and Kira. Hey, Anthony and Kira, welcome to Tiny House Conversations, and thanks so much for joining me on the show today.
Hi, Lucy.
Hi, Lucy.
Hi. So now both of you live in your beautiful tiny home in the Northern Rivers of New South Wales. And when I first came across you a couple of years ago, you were living in your tiny home with regenerative gardens and a syntropic food forest. And I understand that since then, different things have happened and you've had to relocate your tiny. So what I'd love to do today in the conversation is, start with where your tiny house story began. How did you come across tiny houses? And then, we can touch on maybe your tiny home where you were previously living, and then move into, what you're currently doing now and with your tiny house and your experiences there. Does that sound okay for you?
Yeah, sure. Thanks.
Awesome. So would love if you're able to share with us, how did you come across tiny houses and what were some of your main reasons for going tiny?
My journey into the whole tiny house realm began about, maybe 12, 13 years ago. I lived overseas for a really long time and got involved in environmental discussion groups, and that led to becoming aware of my own impact on the environment and how I could reduce my footprint, and then how do you do that? And it was also a financial thing. I wondered if I'd ever have the money to be able to own my own home one day, and I didn't know if I wanted to go into a lot of debt. So I think I was just maybe surfing on the internet one day and saw this tiny home show, maybe not the one that you saw us on, but just some tiny home show, and I that was back when I think they began in America, or they became quite popular in America and New Zealand, and I thought, that sounds like something that I could do, and it just kind of went from there.
What about you, Kira?
Yeah, I had been looking at them for quite a few years. I had a series of interesting life events that led me to put my property on the market. I had a little house and shed on a quarter-acre block in the village, and I needed to get out of the village and have the house on the market. So I actually bought a caravan and put it on a friend's property high up on a ridge, like fully in nature, and with my 2 dogs and cat. and has incredible 18-month journey of living very connected to nature. And that was a turning point for me because I realized that was really more of how I wanted to live, you know, following the sun and the weather and going and gathering your firewood and living in harmony and closely and in feeling to the landscape around me was felt the most natural way of living to me. So obviously I understood that a caravan was not going to be a permanent solution. It was a really good interim solution. And I spent that time looking at different types of tiny builds. You know, I looked at the containers and I looked at little log cabins and I looked at the tiny house on wheels option and had plenty of designs in all those different options stashed in my little book as possibilities moving forward. So
Kira and I met about, was it nearly 5 years ago? Here in the village, they have a festival called the O Heart Festival, which is about conscious living and
environmental awareness.
Yeah, yep. Lots of folk music, and we just started chatting, and I guess that was where our relationship started because at the time I was traveling with my educational program and I was away a lot. And I was also, while I was traveling around Australia in my camper van, I have a VW a T4 transporter, and I'd been living in it for a few years. I'd been checking out different tiny home builders in different parts of Australia just to see what they cost and what they offer and all those kinds of things. And in one of our many conversations over the phone, Kira and I talked about tiny homes, and we both, you know, realised that we were both interested in the same thing there. And as the years went on, a few more years went on, I decided I'd like to buy one. And so we found our designer, who fortunately wasn't too far away because, you know, they're everywhere these days, but this one was up on the Sunshine Coast, so it was only a 3-hour drive from where we are in the Northern Rivers. One of the reasons I really liked this tiny home company was because they were the only one that allowed a lot of input with design. In fact, some of the others I'd seen, one down in Victoria and one in Sydney, one on the south coast of New South Wales, they said, this is it, and you can change the colour and make a few alterations, but this is it, sort of thing. And we're talking a few years ago now. I realise it's probably changed a lot now, but these guys up on the Sunshine Coast were pretty amazing. They said, listen, let's just start from the beginning and let's design it together. And that was really fun, you know, being able to design your own home and within your budget and add this in and add that in. And we were also very conscious of wanting to have a home with as little toxicity as possible, as no plastics and synthetics, or as little as possible, and non-toxic paints and all these other things. And these guys were happy to accommodate there. And often these things cost a bit more, but we're really, really happy we went down that path now and discovered different types of materials that were going to be healthier for us and healthier for the planet at the same time.
Absolutely. So, I love that you both connected over tiny houses, and I feel like I just resonate with so many things that you're both talking about there, like, you know, being immersed in nature, what you were sharing before, Kira, about your earlier experiences. And then also, Anthony, you're talking about like the natural building materials, and just it really is this holistic way of living and being, and you know, reducing our footprint as much as possible, but also creating this like healthy home environment that, when you're talking about customizing it to exactly what you want, down to the paint and to the light bulbs and to the building materials and all those things, is like really making it exactly how you want it and putting your own essence in it. And I think that's really, really beautiful. And I'm wondering what size is your tiny home?
It's 7.2 meters long by the usual 2.4 wide, and height. I always forget this. 4 meters high, because we have 2 loft bedrooms, one at each end. So it ended up it's larger than the average tiny home, but I feel as though it's the perfect size for us. we obviously don't need anything else within the tiny home itself. But you might have noticed in the photos we sent you, we have a really, really big deck, like a massive deck. And that was also a dream because it creates this indoor-outdoor space that you can be right there. You know, we've got trees all around us, and we can even cook on a little pot-bellied stove out there and be kind of outdoors but indoors if you know when it's raining or whatever. So it's the deck was a really important part of what we've done. And we enclosed it too.
Yeah, that came with the move. The original site that when we first installed the tiny house, the veranda was open with a roof, and it's the entire length of the tiny house, and it's 4 meters wide. So that actually gives you enough room for a full day bed on one side, which is like a double bed size, some extra lounge chairs, a yoga area, and a full dining area plus storage. So it's quite a substantial addition to the tiny house itself, which makes a lot of difference for creative movement, especially because, like, Anthony does work from home a lot. And so then he'll have his workstation set up in one area. And then if, you know, I'm here, his daughter Becky now is here as well. And it gives us different options of if each of us need to work or read or have a conversation, that we've got a number of places to sit rather than just the one area.
Mm-hmm. But the reasons for it also enclosing, I never really thought that we'd need to enclose the veranda just on that, we were able to construct the veranda. Okay, we were able to deconstruct the veranda, the entire veranda from the original spot. And the veranda was already made from recycled material, 95% recycled materials. We were able to deconstruct it and then reconstruct it and not have to really maybe have to buy a few extra little things here and there. And we were really conscious of wanting to use recycled materials to enclose it. Mm. And one of the things that happens up here in the Northern Rivers, especially here in the valley that we live in, there are really, really thick fogs in the morning, which last a really, really long time. And we found
which makes everything really, really, really wet.
Things were it was actually like it had rained indoors. And It happens day after day after day. Yeah, like everything. We ended up having to cover the day bed and a whole lot of other things just to stop them being covered in water from the fog. And then the rain, when it's rainy and windy, the rain would come in 2 to 3 meters on either side. And so we ended up, another thing that happens in the Northern Rivers is mold. And if things aren't kept dry, well, then it just molds. And Kira has an allergy to mold. So we thought, let's just enclose it. And it's solved those problems, and we did it just in time for the weather, the weather event that we've been having up here
into our lives. Yeah,
thank goodness for that.
Like, literally, and that was a fun exercise because we really wanted to source as much of the building materials as possible. And so we're talking the top section is all windows, and a lot of them are casement windows, like the old school style. And then tin along the bottom. And then we've just used a bit of hardwood floorboard paneling in between to create the framework. We have an excellent local builder who would come and work every weekend. And, it's a really cool space. It's a really cool indoor-outdoor space. And having the windows and all the way around, you're still seeing all your trees and you're watching all the birds and you're hearing all the noises, but you still got the protection that you need from the environment.
And you can dry your clothes.
Multi-purpose.
Yeah, it's just I guess for people who are listening who may not have built their tiny home, there are things that you discover that we've discovered, and it's drying clothes is one of the things, especially if you have a long period of wet weather
and if you're off grid and you're on solar.
Yeah, so those kind of things, just having somewhere else to be where the other person isn't. Like if you're in a relationship and
that's a big one, isn't it? For
or just to have your own space for a little while. It is nice just to have that other space to be.
That's so funny. You know that speaking to many different couples living in tiny homes, that's something that always comes up. It's like, oh, we didn't necessarily think about this before, or we didn't know what it was going to be like. And to have your own space somewhere that, you can just go do your own thing for a bit. And I guess it's cool that you guys have done the deck and you've kind of expanded out, because maybe you can also use that for that purpose too, like someone's inside, someone's outside, or whatever it might be. And you mentioned as well, so you're talking about like the refurbished, repurposed building materials, and you're talking even down to the paint, because I'm someone that when my tiny house is being built, that's something that I'm super particular about. I know about the VOCs and the off-gassing and all the other chemicals and stuff. And so that's one thing that I've already made sure that I can have done in my tiny home. And I'm wondering for you, was there a particular supplier that you went with? Yeah, people might like to know if it's something that's they're interested in for their tiny as well.
Well, our builder actually sourced the paint.
We just asked him. We said we want chemical-free paint, non-toxic paint, and he sent us like 3 different ones to choose from, which was good, and we just chose one of them. And they are always a bit more expensive, but when it's a tiny home, there's not much to paint, so it doesn't really add that much on to the price. And the other thing I was really happy about were the floor coverings. How it's normally there'll be kind of a fake timber, plasticky kind of floor covering in a lot of places. There's this new thing called Marmoleum, which is like the olden day linoleum, but it's made, I checked it out, it's 98.5% natural fiber, and it's really, really hardy stuff. Like, it's amazing. And they say if you don't like it, if you want to send it back, they'll recycle it into new Marmoleum. So it's fully recyclable, as well as being 98% natural fiber.
Amazing. So that's something you can use for floors, you were saying?
Yeah, floors and like stairs. I think they might even have it for cupboards as well. But they have a website, and they've got so many different colours and patterns to choose from as well. There were hundreds of them.
Oh, that sounds amazing. I'll put that in the show notes. I'll get the link for that. So if anyone wants to check that out, that sounds really great. And did you do you know which company you ended up going for the paint, or you don't remember at the moment?
No.
We could have a look. I'm pretty sure we've still got the containers under the house, and let you know.
If it's not too much trouble, because I know that there was one up in Byron your way.
Rock Coat is a good one.
Rock Coat?
Yeah, Rock Coat. ROCK COTE.
Okay, I haven't heard of that one before.
It is excellent. Yeah, no, definitely check it out.
Awesome, because I know I've been looking at Bio Paint, and then there's also one that was up in Byron Bay, I think, E-Color or something like that. But I know there's a few that do it, so it's cool to just get recommendations.
Make sure that you choose one that is washable and not matte.
That was a mistake that we did. We chose a matte paint, and then it marks really easily, and you can't wash off the marks. So
there's lots of touch-ups. There's 6 monthly touch-ups, which... thank God there's not a lot of wall, because we have so many windows. We really went for a lot of windows, which is brilliant. So I've actually done the exercise and repainted the entire house in one afternoon while Anthony's out on the road. So
wow, that's pretty good.
Yeah.
But that's a great tip. Thank you, because it's these types of things that you tend to learn when you're actually living there and seeing how everything works, or just using things day to day. So that's a great tip. Thank you for that. And is are you fully off the grid with everything?
It's not with gas. That was something that we wanted to explore further down the track and haven't got around to it yet, but we're off grid with electricity. We have a full solar, and we wanted to go all out on the solar, like get the best ever, the best one possible, and the best battery and the best panels, because we don't want to have to replace it in 5 years' time or 10 years' time. And they said it'll go for at least 20 years, probably longer. And it's an amazing system. So we spent, I think it cost nearly $10,000 for our solar, and that was fully installed. The guys coming from over near Nimbin, they're an outfit at Nimbin called Rainbow. I think they're the oldest solar company in Australia, actually.
Okay. Yeah. They understand solar from the wires up. You know, you're talking the old school hippies in the hills that figured out everything when it was 12 volt, and they have, totally adapted to all the latest technologies, but they understand everything right down to the wire. They're not a reseller in that sense. So they're brilliant to work with because they absolutely understand how solar works.
They do, and the service was really good with these guys too. I can still ring them now, nearly 4 years later, and they'll give me a hand over the phone. Yeah, so that the solar is one, and we wanted to have a composting toilet, and that's been amazing. The composting toilet, I didn't realise how great it was going to be and easy, and we have 2 water tanks. We bought a second 10,000 litre water tank because we'd just come through a really long drought back in, was that 2019?
Yeah, the bushfire year. Mm-hmm.
So we thought, okay, let's get another tank. And so we've got 2 10,000 litre tanks and a really good composting toilet that suits 2. There's a third adult, my daughter, living with us now, and it's fine to have 3 people as well. And it's totally not smelly. People often say, oh, doesn't it smell? And it just doesn't. It's just designed so well. But we do have LPG gas, and we'd like to convert to biogas at some point. And I'd like to do a bit of research on that before we make that move, though.
Yeah, I've seen that around a bit, actually, biogas, but I don't know too much about it. Speaking of solar, Kira, you did mention before when we were talking about things that or that you got to discover when you actually moved in, and you were talking about like discoveries with the solar system. So were there any challenges that you came across with that during your time, living tiny?
Mostly it's been fine. I think one time I got excited about running a dehydrator, thinking, oh, it's just a fan. And I filled it all up with stuff I'd picked from the garden and went off for the day, came back and I drained the battery because I underestimated something around that. But I think it was to do with cloud cover or starting it too early. I think that was what it was, because your battery will have reserve in energy in it overnight, and it could be 30, 40, 50, 60%, depending on whether the day prior was a sunny day and how much you were using. But it won't start receiving the draw until the sun is at a certain point. And I think what happened was I started the process too early. You get used to, when you're living in a normal electricity situation, you get up and you just do things first thing in the morning, but the energy wasn't there. So what had happened was I'd drawn the reserve out of the battery prior to the sun actually hitting the panels to recharge. So that was a learning.
Yeah, there's been a few of those. A few times. You just don't, we're pretty used to it now. And I have to say it is nice. It's like living your values and living within your means, living as in with everything. You have to consider one of the problems we have today, one of the reasons why we're facing all of these environmental challenges is because we expect everything to be at our fingertips and be able to use as much of everything as we want whenever we want it, you know? And it's nice to be able to live using free energy from the sun, but knowing that you just don't have as much as you want whenever you want it, and to make sure that you have to adjust your day and your habits and your
it's actually really it is most of the time it is really lovely to work with what you're given and go, okay, today's a sunny day, today's a great day to do XYZ, and live in harmony with the elements. I do appreciate that. And if it's extreme, like extreme rains, they're always round. There's the local laundromat. You can pop down there and do a few loads once a week if you need to. And it's not the be all and the end all. But also I have to say, because I'm probably more, what you would say, more sensitive at an energetic level, and I do feel a difference in a house that's powered on solar energy as opposed to grid electricity in terms of the nervous system stimulation. And I've never slept well my entire life. I've always had issues with sleep and insomnia and very light sleeper. And since living in the tiny house and living off grid, I just sleep amazingly well. So for me, that's a tell.
Yeah, I can resonate with that too, because I tend to be really sensitive with like the EMFs, so like the electromagnetic radiation and all of that kind of stuff, and you know, the chemicals. And so yeah, I've heard that from a lot of people, and I know I love what you're both talking about there of, you know, conscious lifestyle choices and actually being connected to the elements and the weather and the seasons, and also to your everyday way of being and living. And it feels like it's very much in alignment with, you know, maybe what we were doing a long time ago before all of this modern life, you know, came into developed so quickly, and before you know it, like this is kind of like our reality at the moment. And there's something to be said for going back to that and that traditional wisdom and ancient ways of being that, you know, of the past. And you know, it kind of reminds me of like even just the aspects of the tiny home. You know, you're talking about the composting toilet before, so it's kind of like connection to the earth, and then the water tanks being connected to the water, and then using solar with the sun and being connected to the sun and fire energy in that way. And just, you know, so many things like that on a deeper level, I feel is you know, just such a beautiful way to reconnect with all of that.
Yeah, you do end up feeling that the house is a living being.
I love that.
It's so satisfying. I found I actually never thought it'd be so satisfying to have to deal with my own, you know, our own waste, if you like. But there's something satisfying about knowing that it's not going to be pumped out in the ocean with a whole lot of chemicals, for one thing. But knowing that it's putting nutrients back into the soil. And we have a nice little composting system we have with our food as well. And I just find it quite satisfying doing those chores. They're not really a chore, just become a part of what we do, you know?
Yeah. And I'd love to know, what were some of the must-have features you both, you know, had to include in your home? And do you have like a favorite feature in or around your home?
I always go for the hatch. There's a hatch, and a lot of people we show the home, they go, oh yeah, I've got to have a hatch in my tiny home. And that came from this is before I met Kira. There's this company where I think they're from Sydney or the Hunter Valley, where you can go and have a holiday or an overnight stay in a tiny home. And I thought, oh, this would be a great way of just feeling how it is to sleep and live in a tiny home for a couple of days. And I did it. And they had a hatch in the ceiling, and I hadn't even thought about having a hatch. And it does really open up, well, excuse the pun, but it opens up a whole, like you get light through and it lets heat out, and you can get out there as well. Saves you having to have a climb up a ladder to get onto the roof. But yeah, you can see the stars through it when you go into sleep at night. It's maybe my favorite feature.
Yeah, it's really good at letting the hot air out, especially after cooking and things like that, because as we know, heat rises, and that's where the beds are. And being able to have a quick way of releasing that heat is really brilliant. I would have to say my favorite feature is one of the newest additions to our tiny house life, and that is the outdoor bath. It's very special. So we built a little add-on outdoor bathhouse, which is basically an L-shape frame with tin and a little roof that connects to the main house just below. And we've got a lovely brass big wide shower head that I got on Marketplace, and a proper clawfoot bath, all Marketplace, of course, and a wash basin, and it's all plumbed with copper and brass, and it's absolutely divine. But the best thing is when you sit in that bathtub, you're looking out at these beautiful, it's like actually being in the Hamptons. You're looking at these beautiful, beautiful pine trees and amazing forest, and you get a bit of the ridge line looking towards the pinnacle, and it is just the most magical thing.
That was another thing that I guess I'd thought of before when planning the tiny home, I've always wanted to have an outdoor bathroom. And so when I had the tiny home built, I asked them to put the plumbing, like the hot and cold water pipes, right through to the back, because I thought, if I'm going to have an outdoor bathroom, it's going to be behind the tiny home. So it made it a lot more simple just to do that. All the plumber had to do was just connect up to those two pipes there.
So essentially you've got the indoor bathroom and that side wall, and then on the other side of the wall you've got the outdoor bathroom. And now that we have a third member in the house, it's actually great because you can have two people can have a shower at the same time.
That's great. And the outdoor bath sounds divine. I can't imagine, just being there out again, that connection to nature and the outdoors. It sounds lovely. I'm wondering also, so what was the overall, I know you've kind of relocated and all that, but what was the overall cost of your home initially? I know you've added some things on as well, like the deck, but if you had to estimate.
The cost back then for the completed tiny home and delivered, like towed down from the Sunshine Coast, was $84,000. But I believe they've gone up quite a lot, demand and building material prices. Yeah. So I feel as though the same one now would be closer to 100,000, but it was 84, and that was about 5,000 more than standard because we added, the hatch and other things as well.
The better choice materials, like the environmental materials, would have added as well.
I remember that we were able to have the tiny home and a water tank, the deck, like a massive deck, and the solar, and it all came to less than 105,000. It was about 104,000 and a couple of hundred, and the budget. Our budget was 110,000, pretty much. So we came in. Yeah.
Yeah, it does seem to be that I know I've noticed for sure that the costs have gone up in the last couple of years. And it sounds like money well spent, though, for everything that you've got. And then, especially upgrading to, more, making sure you've got more natural materials and paint and all of those types of things. I know that you're both passionate about regenerative agriculture, and that's something that is a big passion for me as well. And, in your home initially, you had a lovely syntropic food forest. For anyone that's not familiar with what that is, are you able to just give like a brief overview? And then I'm just wondering if that's what you're also creating in your location that you're at now, or, you've already started doing that.
It's a particular method of regenerative farming, agricultural farming, that's emerged out of Brazil by a Swiss-Brazilian farmer called Ernst Gotsch. And he studied forests and regeneration within forests and observed things such as when a tree would come down in an area, whether it was because it was struck by lightning or whatever, that cutting of that life force and falling to the ground functioned as a type of reset. And suddenly you'd have new life all around. The canopy would be broken open, there'd be more sun in, there'd be all this micro life and fungal life around the tree, and so on and so forth. And it's a lot more complex than that, but that's the kind of abridged version. And so basically he's developed a system that simulates that to speed up the natural process that would occur in a forest over a long period of time. We're talking, hundreds of years, because lives of trees are substantially longer and a different time span to human life. He's adapted some of these scientific processes or scientifically measurable processes that occur in natural forests into an agricultural system to speed up processes in which microbiology grows in the soil, regeneration happens. There's even hormone bursts that go through the networks of the trees and surrounding plants when pruning happens. So say when animals come and graze and pruning happens, that stimulates a circuitry away from the aging and degenerative process and back into regeneration. So that's how I would describe syntropy. It's the opposite of entropy. And so we've got a beautiful friend here who teaches this method, and we got to spend some time with him, and he helped us establish the original gardens down the bottom. And then when we moved, we had a very short period of time to relocate. We had about 55 trees that were year's growth, and we literally dug up and transplanted those 55 trees over the course of 2 weeks.
And only one died.
Yeah, because the taproot was too, and but that one had to be moved because it was right in front of the tiny house. But we wouldn't have chosen to move all the trees if we knew that the people who purchased the property where we were happy to keep it there. But they actually had spoken with us and said they had completely different plans with that site, and they would hate to just come and clear all those beautiful trees that we'd planted, and that we were more than welcome to come and just dig them all up and relocate them. So for the sake of the trees not being just
abandoned
or destroyed after a short period of time, we went for it. And amazingly, by grace, all of that was replanted, reestablished and relocated, and given just the right amount of time for the networks of the trees and their roots to stabilize sufficiently so that when the big rains came, there was enough structure in the soil to prevent any erosion.
Yes, in tropic farming, it's pretty amazing. I hadn't heard of it before, but it's really creating a future food forest using natural systems. And this guy's really thought it through. I think he lived in a forest or something for a decade or two and just studied it, and so worked out how to speed up that process. Yeah,
and so there's all the things that are happening, the sequestration of carbon and the nutrient-dense food is the other thing. It's like organic farming is at one level, regenerative farming takes everything to a whole nother level. And we're not just here to grow food for ourselves, we're actually here to grow a better environment around us, better soil, better
habitat
food
for all of the other little creatures that live here. We just noticed how many birds and insects have come since we've started doing it. It's really amazing. Different bird species have come around, and they're even flying close to the house too, closer and closer. So it has amazing benefits, and we can eat from it as well, which is fantastic. We are feeding a lot of little other critters out there. There's a bandicoot that's been going pretty crazy he pretty much ate 90% of our cauliflowers last season. But you just kind of live with
God
that.
love him.
Oh, sounds like many different beings are benefiting from it, and it's this beautiful symbiosis of what we already see in nature. And I guess being able to be a part of that through this type of farming, I think is such a solution for the future. And do you feel like, just having had that experience on your own land or where you're part, do you feel like it's something that can be replicated on a bigger scale?
Oh, yeah,
absolutely.
For sure. Yeah, that's one of the things he said. He said you could do it if you've just got a house in a normal urban in Sydney or Melbourne or somewhere like that. You could do it on 2 square meters, or you could do it on 100 acres, whatever you want. But you wouldn't need to do it on 100 acres, because the amount of food, we're just blown away by the amount of food. We have about half an acre here under cultivation, maybe.
And not even all of it is really established.
And we've got we've got 20 banana trees, and 5 of them have now produced a bunch of bananas. One banana bunch has 100 bananas on it. So we're soon going to have 500 bananas. It wasn't kind of planned like that, but we'll be able to, feed our neighbours in our community and give them away to other people. And that's just on our little plot here. So it's definitely something you can do in an urban situation, or can upscale and feed. There should be no reason why anyone's hungry on this planet, basically, at all.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree more with that. And I hope that we see, more and more of that, and, have this beautiful, abundant resource to be able to feed everyone, and for to have this deeper connection to our food again, because I think everything is so outsourced. Obviously, depending on where you are, if you're not necessarily growing a food, but yeah, I think it's so in alignment, this regenerative agriculture with the tiny house way of living. So yeah, I hope to see more of that. And now I'm curious for both of you, what is one thing that you both love most about this tiny way of living?
Well, you don't have to spend an entire day cleaning. No, I'm serious. Because
I know I've heard it a lot.
Our lives are full, and we like to participate in a lot of things and help other people. And, Anthony volunteers at a local animal sanctuary, and he's out how many times a week in the mornings and in the evenings helping to put them out and put them away. And, we're running around a lot. And I really do appreciate the fact that the two of us can get in and spend an hour and everything is ship-shape. It doesn't dominate an entire day because we actually don't have a day spare just to get the house back in order. So lifestyle-wise, that's a real big tick for me.
Yeah, I think, that's something that's really important. Well, the amount of time you don't spend just, cleaning, because I've lived in normal houses and normal apartments all my life, and you'd have to spend half a Saturday or a whole Saturday just cleaning up after yourself. But I think something Kira mentioned earlier about just being right there, living close to, I guess, what we call nature. We're just so lucky. We're surrounded by trees. It's peaceful. We don't hear any traffic, and we're living our values. It's something that brings peace and satisfaction on its own.
Also, I'd have to say there's a quality that comes with tiny house living that you may not have with a conventional house. And I notice that especially with when kids come round to, like friends will come round and they've got little children and they just love the loft and they love that there's a ladder and they love that there's an outdoor bathroom and it's all so cool and fun. And I do feel like that. And, we've got a projector on the veranda and we pull down screens so we can have our outdoor movies on the veranda, and it's just a lighter lifestyle. Yeah.
Beautiful. And I'd love to know as well, has there anything that's been particularly challenging, whether it's unexpectedly or just challenges that you've come up against, maybe besides the recent events, but just in general in tiny house living?
You've got to be aware of each other. This is something that I didn't think about before. Well, if you're a couple or if you're more than one person, you really do have to respect the other person's space and know that you're in a tiny space and that you can't go anywhere else and just have your downtime unless you want to go for a walk somewhere. But it's and we're dealing with it. We've had our moments, of course, but we talk them through. But there is, you're in a tiny space and you've got to be aware that there's another person there. And if I'm doing something anywhere in this space, Kira's going to hear it, pretty much, and vice versa. So you wouldn't have that in a normal house. You could go into another room and close the door and you're fine.
Yeah, that's the thing. People who are thinking about getting a tiny house need to understand. I mean, and they could build in a design where they've got a bedroom with a door. I have seen those. But for the most part, if you're going for the loft option, so you've got more livable space on the main floor level, you're essentially living on a shelf above the kitchen and living room. And with that comes communal space. Your personal bedroom and your personal space is now in a communal space 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.
And if people just pop around and want to visit, you can't go and lock yourself in your bedroom. You've both got to, be social.
Smile and wave. So, I mean, we've had some great chats about things because early morning movements and noise levels and, morning activities, if one person is still needing to rest. I mean, we have a great thing because Anthony works in a bakery and gets up at 1:30 in the morning every Wednesday and comes home at 6 in the morning, and I'm a light sleeper. So he's had some wonderful opportunity to learn how to tiptoe amongst the tulips. Otherwise, I have an entire day where I don't sleep until the following night. So, yeah, those sorts of things. But really, it's just you've got to know that going in, that you're actually going to be in a shared space, and it does provide for really good relationship building conversations.
That was really well put.
Thank you.
I love it. There's always work to do when in relationship with others. And I guess a tiny house perhaps illuminates that a little bit more because it is a smaller space and there's always almost nowhere to hide.
You can't avoid relationship in a tiny house, and that's a good thing.
Yeah, you'd have to deal with things. I'd assume. Yeah, you can't just run away.
You really do.
Such a good insight. Such a good insight. And Anthony, I know that you've got your plastic pollution solutions. Would love to hear a little bit more about that if you want to share.
Yeah, it's in a bit of a hiatus at the moment due to everything that's been going on in the world over the last couple of years. It's essentially an educational program for schools, which helps also for communities and businesses if they like, but it's been mainly for schools to help them reduce their single-use plastic and waste in general. But also really it's been about what I've seen, what I've noticed over the years, I've been doing it for about 8 years now, is that it's a stark example of human impact, undeniable human impact on the environment. If you know what I mean, there's a lot of different things, different challenges that are impacting our environment at the moment. So many, in fact. But there are a lot of people out there that may either deny that it's happening or don't think it's as bad as it is. But plastic pollution isn't one of those. You know, you can just see it. It's right there, and it can only be humans that's doing it. So it's in a way, it's an opportunity to show little kids that, you know, humans haven't been living in right relationship with their planet, and that that there is a solution. It's not one of these doom and gloom scenarios. What can we do? You know, it's really, really simple for anyone of any age to be able to address this issue and be empowered to help their friends and their family do the same thing. It's been a wonder. It's been amazing. It was something that happened organically. I never thought I'd be driving around Australia going into schools. I wasn't a very good student myself, so it's quite ironic that I ended up going in and becoming a type of teacher. But it's been amazing. It's been the most amazing vocation I've ever had, and I've had quite a few vocations over the years to be able to do that. And it's been, I think, maybe the most wonderful part of it is it's been a collaboration. There's no way I could have come up with an educational program on my own. So the people I met along the way are mainly teachers and even people who work in council waste facilities and even just community members. There's a lot of people who've contributed to the program, and it's quite unique. But it's been a bit of a shame about everything that's been going on. I haven't been able to go into schools much at all, particularly the last 6 months. So as Kira said, I've been doing all kinds of other things, working as a baker's assistant, a barista, a bartender, animal sanctuary, kinds of things.
Thank God our local village has a beautiful cafe and restaurant and means by which you can participate and be part of something.
It is. It's actually quite an amazing village. That it's another thing that I dream, living in a place where there was a lot of community spirit, a lot of community participation. It's a pretty amazing place to live. There's a lot of social stuff goes on for a tiny little village, and a lot of other opportunities to just participate in, I guess, volunteering or, you know, doing things for others. So it's really landed well here.
Yeah. And, you know, it sounds like a wonderful offering that you were giving back to the community and teaching about the plastic, because I agree it is something that is just everywhere. We can see it. And, you know, even just something like if everyone stopped using plastic water bottles tomorrow, you know, they wouldn't be able to there wouldn't be a business for them. There wouldn't be a market for them. And just like these small and simple things, you can start with little things in your own home, and then that contributes to big things on a collective and national, community, global level, all of that. So do you have maybe like one tip around that someone can do in their home tomorrow, or anything that you guys do maybe?
Something that I love that we do, which was another kind of something that I'd hoped that we could do, is to we're very lucky. The nearest town to us, Big Town, has a great bulk food shop, and we go there. We go there once a week or once every 2 weeks, and it also has a local farmers market. We're so lucky. So it's a really good. We're buying things from local growers and things that have grown within probably 20 kilometres of where we live, so we can buy local food from local people, and we know the money, goes straight to them. And the bulk food shop, we can take our jars in and just refill them, and we do it with detergents and soaps and all kinds of other things too. So we're able to avoid a lot of single-use plastic. We can't avoid it 100%, and I guess maybe that might be the tip, that you may never be able to avoid single-use plastic 100%. I hope there'll be a time when we can. But if you can just start phasing out things you really don't need, and water bottles is one of those things. It's just ridiculous. When I see someone drinking out of a single-use water bottle, and thankfully they're becoming less and less now, but I get quite a shock. It's like seeing someone light up a cigarette. The 4 most common ones you've probably heard of: bags, bottles, cups, and straws. Everybody can cut all of those out fairly quickly. Plastic bags, plastic bottles, straws, and coffee cups, which have a lot of people don't realise that paper coffee cups have a plastic lining, which makes them unrecyclable. So if you can cut those things out and go reusable, just think reusable. And if your town or suburb has a bulk food shop, go in there and start taking your jars in. And it really is, it's pretty amazing place where we have those things available to us quite readily.
Amazing. Thank you for sharing that. That's a great tip where, I guess anyone can start in their own home. And, as we wrap up the conversation today, Anthony and Kira, is there anywhere that anyone can find you or connect with you online? I know that you said you've kind of put on hold what you're doing with Plastic Pollution Solutions. But do you have a page or anything like that?
We've got an Instagram, and I started it when the tiny house was first being moved onto the property, as a way of, like, as a photo album for us, really, to document the journey. And then it's sort of become a lot more since then, because people have gotten interested in tiny house lifestyle and what we do with food and gardening and the plastic waste side of things. It ends up being on this little Instagram account, which is called Little Fig of the Hamptons.
And it's,
I love it. your reference to the Hamptons before in the bathtub as well, right?
That came out of a very wonderful conversation of happy play with the owner of the property, and it stuck.
Yeah, it kind of does look a little bit like, I've never been to the Hamptons, but I've seen pictures of it. But there's a lot of pine trees somebody planted here quite a while ago, and they're really established. And it does it looks a bit like that part of the States.
Oh, lovely.
And, there's Plastic Pollution Solutions I just have a website, and I'm on Facebook as well. It's plasticpollutionsolutions.com.au. And I'm slowly getting back into business, going into local preschools, which is always fun.
Oh, great. Yeah. Well, I will link to all of that in the show notes for everyone. And if you want to find the links to those, you can head on over to tinyhouseconversations.com. And I just want to say thank you so much, Kira and Anthony, for your time today. Loved hearing your stories and your tiny house experiences, and even those insights that you may not necessarily discover until you actually move in and live that way. So thank you again.
Yeah, thanks. No worries. It's been a pleasure being a part of your podcast, and well done for doing what you do as well. I'm sure it's going to be a great benefit to a growing amount of people, because it is a growing amount of people who are wanting to go down this path now. So
I'd say
well done,
a fair
Lucy.
few more after recent events.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for saying that. I really appreciate it. And I guess it's like my contribution back to the tiny community, because I've, received so much from them, just from how generous everyone is of sharing, their journeys and what worked and what hasn't worked and their stories online. So I can't wait I definitely agree it is growing, and I can't wait to see what happens in this space. So it's great to be a part of it with you both. And if you're listening to this episode at home, thanks so much for taking the time to hang out with us. If you want more Tiny House conversations, I release new episodes every Thursday. So until next time, we will see you then. Hey, Tiny Houses, thanks again for listening. And if you enjoyed the conversation today, you found it valuable, and you want to support the podcast, the best way you can do that is to share the love. That way I can keep bringing you more tiny house conversations to help you on your own tiny journey. So here are 3 ways that you can support the podcast. Number 1, if you have a friend or family member that you feel would benefit from hearing these conversations, feel free to share it with them, email them, text them, send them a telegram, do whatever you need to do to share it with them. Number 2, if you hit the subscribe button, you'll know exactly when the next episode is live. And number 3, if you head on over to Apple Podcasts or wherever you're listening to podcasts and leave a 5-star rating and review. Thank you so much in advance. I appreciate you, and I'll see you in the next episode.